On a scorching morning in Phoenix, a 72-year-old lady was left alone inside a locked car, without air conditioning, while her influencer daughter-in-law went up for 5 little minutes. What started as a small oversight turned into a fight for survival, stifled by the suffocating heat and indifference. When the truth comes to light, shocking revelations expose a home where affection was merely a facade for social media. Now, thy son needs to choose between maintaining appearances or protecting the one who was always by his side, no matter the cost. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The relentless Phoenix sun beat down on the Arizona capital that February morning. Thermometers marked 104 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, and the asphalt seemed to melt under the scorching heat. Mrs. Constance Mills, 72, felt drops of sweat trickle down her forehead as she waited in the passenger seat of the black SUV parked in the garage of the luxurious Desert Oasis Estates. The car, with its tinted windows and beige leather interior, belonged to her daughter-in-law Lydia Morris, 35, a digital influencer with over 2 million followers. "I'm just going to grab the purse I forgot upstairs. Mrs. Mills, it'll be quick," Lydia had said, adjusting her perfectly straightened hair. "You stay here in the cool car. I'd turn on the air conditioning, but it'll just waste the battery for 5 little minutes." Constance nodded, too weak to argue. She depended on her daughter-in-law for everything, since moving into her son Edward Mills' house, a renowned cardiologist in Phoenix. The elderly woman had left her modest home in Flagstaff after suffering a minor ailment, at the insistence of her son, who wanted her close to care for her health. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Constance began to feel the air inside the vehicle, becoming increasingly thin. The closed windows turned the car into an oven, and the Arizona heat, known for its intensity during the dry months, seemed to drain all her energy. She tried to open the door, but the automatic locks were engaged. "Lydia? Lydia, my dear?" Her voice came out weak as she tapped on the window, hoping someone would hear her. The underground garage was deserted. Upstairs, Joanna Sanders, the housemaid, was preparing lunch, a 50-year-old woman born in rural Oklahoma. She had worked for the family for 5 years and had a special affection for Mrs. Mills, who treated her with dignity, unlike her younger employer. "Where is Mrs. Mills?" she asked when she crossed paths with Lydia, who was entering her room holding her cell phone. "She's waiting in the car. We're going to the mall, but I forgot to post the sponsored content I promised for the cosmetics brand," Lydia replied, without taking her eyes off the screen. As she recorded a story talking about self-care and self-love, Joanna frowned. "You left her in the car. With this heat?" "Relax, Joanna. The car is in the garage, not in the sun, and I'm coming down now." Lydia adjusted the lighting, trying to find the perfect angle for her video. 20 minutes later, Constance felt her heart race. Her blood pressure began to rise, and dark spots danced in her vision. The air inside the car was heavy, almost unbreathable. With the strength she had left, she began to knock on the window more intensely. Joanna, coming down to put groceries in the garage pantry, heard a muffled noise. She followed the sound and saw Mrs. Mills in the car, her face red and her hands weakly hitting the window. She ran over, trying to open the door, but it was locked. Oh my goodness. "Mrs. Mills." At that exact moment, Edward arrived at the estate. The doctor had cancelled 2 appointments to have lunch at home, worried about his mother, who had been looking down lately. Upon entering the garage, he saw Joanna desperately banging on his wife's car window. "What happened?" he asked, dropping his medical bag and running towards them. "Your mother, doctor!" "She's been locked in there for over half an hour." Edward felt his blood run cold. He ran to the car and saw his mother almost fainting, her breathing irregular, her face red as a burning ember. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. Without a second thought, he grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the passenger window. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the garage. Edward carefully removed the shards and managed to unlock the car, opening the door. The hot, suffocating air escaped, and he carefully pulled his mother out. "Mom! Mom, talk to me!" Edward laid her on the cool garage floor, checking her vital signs. Her pulse was racing and her breathing was shallow. "Joanna, bring water and wet towels, quickly." The maid ran upstairs, Edward, with years of experience in cardiac emergencies, loosened his mother's clothes and placed her in a recovery position. Slowly, Constance began to regain consciousness. "Son," she murmured with difficulty. "Lydia left me here." "Shh, don't talk now, Mom. You need to recover." Edward moistened her dry lips with the water Joanna brought. I asked her to turn on the air. She said she'd be right back." The words came out in gasps. Edward felt a rising anger. Where was Lydia? Why had she left his mother locked in the car in that infernal heat? He looked at his watch. It was almost noon, the time when temperatures peaked in Phoenix. "Doctor, should I call an ambulance?" Joanna asked, holding Mrs. Mills' trembling hand. "No, I'll take her to the hospital myself. My car is closer and we'll save time. Help me carry her." Together they carried Constance to Edward's vehicle. The elderly woman, still dizzy, mumbled incoherent words. The doctor turned the air conditioning to maximum and adjusted the seat so his mother would be comfortable. Joanna, "Stay with her while I get my bag and notify the hospital that we're coming." The maid nodded, stroking Constance's grey hair. "It'll be all right, Mrs. Mills. Dr. Edward will take care of you." As Edward went upstairs to get his equipment, Joanna leaned over the elderly woman and whispered, "It was Mrs. Morris who left you there, wasn't it?" Constance just closed her eyes, a solitary tear rolling down her wrinkled face. "She never liked me. I was always a nuisance." "Don't say that, Mrs. Mills. You're a blessing in this house." Edward returned with his medical bag and a change of light clothes for his mother. Before getting into the car, he looked upstairs where the apartment was. Through the living room window, he could see Lydia pacing back and forth, gesturing to her cell phone camera, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding in the garage. "Joanna, where is my wife?" he asked, his tone controlled but laden with suppressed fury. The maid hesitated. "She's upstairs, Doctor. Recording videos for Instagram." Edward gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. "Call her. Tell her we're taking my mother to Phoenix General Hospital. If she cares, she can meet us there." The car sped off quickly. In the back seat, Constance breathed with difficulty, her body still recovering from the extreme heat. Edward drove in silence, his mind full of questions and his heart heavy with worry. What seemed like an ordinary day was turning into the beginning of a revelation that would forever change the dynamics of that family. Phoenix General Hospital was bustling that scorching afternoon. Doctors and nurses rushed through the corridors, while patients waited for care. Edward parked the car in the reserved medical spot, and with the help of two nurses who recognized the cardiologist, took Mrs. Mills inside. "Dr. Mills, what happened?" asked Dr. Renee Campbell, the general practitioner coordinating the shift that day. "Severe heat stroke, possible dehydration, and heat stress. My mother was trapped inside a closed car for over half an hour," Edward replied, his voice trembling with worry and anger. Quickly, the medical team began procedures. Mrs. Mills was placed on a stretcher and taken to a refrigerated room. Intravenous fluids were administered to combat dehydration, and cardiac monitoring was installed to track her irregular heartbeats. Edward watched everything with a clinical eye, torn between the role of son and doctor. His mother, always so strong despite her advanced age, seemed small and fragile against the white hospital sheets. Her wrinkled hands, which for so many years had cared for him, now trembled slightly as the nurse checked her blood pressure. "Son," Constance called in a weak voice. Edward approached, holding her hand. "I'm here, Mom. Everything will be fine. Don't tell her." "I don't want to cause trouble," the elderly woman murmured, her eyes half closed. "What do you mean, Mom? Lydia left you locked in that car." "It could have been much worse." Edward kept his voice down, aware of the hospital environment. "Your wife has so many worries. I'm just a burden to both of you." Those words hit Edward like a punch. His mother, who had dedicated her entire life to raising her children alone after being widowed young, now considered herself a burden. How had he allowed this to happen? "You never were and never will be a burden, Mom. You are my priority, do you understand?" Edward kissed the elderly woman's forehead, tasting the salty sweat that still lingered on her skin. Dr. Renee approached with the first test results. "Edward, we need to talk." They moved away a bit and the doctor showed him the images and results. She had an early-stage heart attack due to heat stress. Dehydration is severe. and there are signs of heat exhaustion. If she had stayed longer in those conditions— Edward closed his eyes, absorbing the impact of those words. The possibility of losing his mother in such an absurd way made his stomach churn. I'm admitting her for observation. At least 48 hours, Renee continued. Considering her age and cardiac history, we need to monitor her closely. Thank you, Renee. I'll stay with her. Edward, the doctor hesitated. How did this happen? You said she was trapped in a car. The cardiologist ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. My wife left her waiting in the car, in the building's garage, and forgot. With this Phoenix heat, you know how a closed car turns into an oven in minutes. Renee frowned but asked no more questions. Both knew that the temperature inside a closed vehicle could rise drastically even in a garage, especially in a city known for its extreme heat like Phoenix. While Constance received the necessary care, Edward sat in the waiting room, cell phone in hand. No message or call from Lydia. He decided not to contact her, wanting to see how long his wife would take to notice their absence or care about what happened. Joanna arrived at the hospital an hour later, bringing clean clothes for Mrs. Mills and homemade food for Edward. The maid sat beside him, her face marked by worry. How is she, doctor? She's stable but weak. They'll keep her under observation for a few days. Joanna hesitated, twisting the dishcloth she held in her hands. Dr. Edward, I need to tell you something. I don't know if I should, but— Edward turned to her. What is it, Joanna? This isn't the first time Mrs. Morris has left your mother in difficult situations. The maid lowered her voice. Last week, she left Mrs. Mills waiting for over 2 hours on a food court bench at the mall without water, while she shopped. Your mother got so dizzy that a stranger had to help her. Edward felt his blood boil. Why did my mother never tell me this? She's afraid of causing problems between you and your wife. Mrs. Mills always says you two have a perfect life, and she doesn't want to interfere. Perfect life, Edward repeated bitterly. His marriage to Lydia, which from the outside seemed ideal, had been deteriorating for months. His wife's obsession with her digital influencer career, constant trips for events, and growing indifference to family matters had created a chasm between them. Constance's arrival had only highlighted problems he had tried to ignore. There's more, Doctor. Joanna seemed uncomfortable. When you're not home, Mrs. Morris barely speaks to your mother. She leaves her food in the fridge without heating it. Once she turned off the air conditioning in Mrs. Mills' room, saying it was a waste of energy. Edward massaged his temples, feeling a headache forming. How had he not noticed what was happening in his own home? Why didn't you tell me this before, Joanna? I tried to hint several times, Doctor, but you're always so busy. And Mrs. Morris threatened to fire me if I stirred up trouble, as she puts it. At that moment, Edward's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Lydia. Where are you? I went back to the car and found the window broken. How absurd. Did someone try to steal my SUV? Edward felt a knot in his throat. Not a word about Constance, no concern for his mother-in-law's well-being. We're at the hospital. My mother got sick from being trapped in your car, he replied dryly. The reply took a few minutes to arrive. Oh my God, what a scare. But what do you mean, trapped? The door wasn't locked, you just had to open it. I'll stop by the salon and then I'll come. I need to be presentable for visitors. Kisses. Edward almost broke his phone in anger. His mother had almost not survived because of Lydia's negligence, and her main concern was being presentable for possible hospital photos. Doctor, don't be like that. Joanna touched his arm. The important thing is that we arrived in time. Mrs. Mills is strong, she will recover. It's not just that, Joanna. Edward put his phone in his pocket. I'm starting to realize that I no longer know the woman I married. Or maybe I never truly knew her. A nurse appeared at the waiting room door. Dr. Mills, your mother is asking for you. Edward got up and followed her to the room where Constance had been accommodated. She seemed more alert, her cheeks regaining some color. Seeing her son, she gave a tired smile. My son, how embarrassing to cause all this trouble. Edward sat on the edge of the bed and took his mother's hand in his. You never caused me trouble, Mum. I'm the one who should apologize for not taking better care of you. Constance caressed her son's face. You were always a good boy. Remember when you were 10 and stayed up all night when I had that bad flu? You didn't even want to go to school the next day. Memories flooded Edward's mind. His mother, an elementary school teacher, had raised 2 children alone after her husband's early death. There was never a lack of love and dedication, even in the most difficult times. And now when it was his turn to return all that care, he had failed miserably. Mom, I need to know the truth. How has it been living with us? Has Lydia treated you well? Constance's smile wavered. Your wife has her own life, son. She's young, beautiful, busy. She can't waste time with an old woman like me. That doesn't answer my question, Mom. Constance looked away. I don't want to cause trouble, Edward. You and Lydia make such a beautiful couple. In the photos she posts, you look so happy. In the photos, Edward repeated, realizing the chasm between reality and the carefully constructed image on his wife's social media. Mom, I promise things will change. You deserve to be treated with love and respect. At that moment, the sound of high heels echoed down the hallway. Lydia had arrived, impeccably dressed and made up, as if ready for a photo shoot, and not to visit an elderly, hospitalized woman. Lydia entered the hospital room like a perfumed breeze, contrasting with the aseptic environment. Her brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her flawless makeup disguised any sign of concern. She carried a small bouquet of flowers bought at the hospital shop and a rehearsed expression of consternation. My dear mother-in-law, what a scare you gave us, she exclaimed, approaching the bed and placing an air kiss near Constance's face. How are you feeling? Edward observed the scene with a critical detachment he had never experienced before. His wife's concern sounded as fake as the motivational captions she put on perfectly arranged breakfast photos. I'm better, thank you, Constance replied politely. That's good to hear. I was desperate when I found out. But what exactly happened? I don't understand why you couldn't get out of the car. Edward intervened before his mother could answer. The doors were locked, Lydia. My mother was trapped inside the car for over 30 minutes with the absurd Phoenix heat without air conditioning. Locked? Impossible. I'm sure I left it unlocked. Lydia placed the flowers on the bedside table and sat in the armchair near the window. You must have pressed the lock button by accident, Mrs. Mills. The elderly woman did not respond, only lowered her gaze to her wrinkled hands resting on the white sheet. Edward noticed the gesture and felt his anger grow, but he controlled himself. The hospital was no place for the confrontation forming in his mind. The broken window will cost a fortune to fix, Lydia continued, fiddling with her phone. I'll have to cancel the shoot with the hair product brand tomorrow. I can't appear in a car with a broken window. My mother almost didn't make it, and you're worried about a shoot? Edward's voice came out louder than he intended. Lydia seemed genuinely surprised by her husband's reaction. Of course I'm worried about Mrs. Mills, darling. But life goes on, doesn't it? We have commitments, contracts to fulfill. She smiled sweetly at her mother-in-law. You understand, don't you, Mrs. Mills? Work can't stop. At that moment, a nurse entered to check Constance's vital signs. Lydia immediately grabbed her phone and took a selfie next to the bed, positioning herself so that her mother-in-law and the medical equipment appeared in the background. What are you doing? Edward asked incredulously. Documenting this difficult moment for the family, darling. My followers are worried. I received over 100 messages asking why I hadn't posted anything today. She began typing a caption. I'll write something like, Moments of trial strengthen our faith and our family. Gratitude to the angel doctors and nurses who care for my beloved mother-in-law. The nurse, clearly uncomfortable, quickly finished her notes and left the room. Edward, trying to maintain composure, asked to speak to Lydia in the corridor. What's wrong with you? He asked as soon as they closed the door, turning my mother's situation into content for your social media. Lydia crossed her arms, defensive. I'm a digital influencer, Edward. Sharing my real life authentically is my job. In fact, several followers have already asked me for more content about my relationship with my mother-in-law. This could be an opportunity to increase our family engagement. Edward took a step back as if slapped. Family engagement? Are you listening to yourself? My mother almost didn't survive today. And you're thinking about social media metrics? You're exaggerating, as always. Your mother just got a little dehydrated. And it wasn't my fault. I told her I'd be right back. How was I supposed to know the car would lock? Edward took a deep breath, holding back words that could be irremediable. Let's leave this conversation for when we're home. Now is not the time or place. Lydia shrugged and went back into the room, smiling as if nothing had happened. Edward stayed in the corridor for a few moments, trying to organize his thoughts. His marriage, which had already shown cracks for months, now revealed an abyss of values and priorities. Back in the room, he found Lydia showing Constance the likes her last post had received. The elderly woman just nodded politely, the discomfort visible in her tired eyes. "Lydia," Edward interrupted, "my mother needs to rest, and I'm staying here tonight." "Stay here? But we have the clinic's charity dinner tonight. I've already bought a new dress and scheduled my makeup and hair." Lydia seemed genuinely shocked. "All the important doctors in the city will be there. It's a unique networking opportunity for you and content for me. My mother is more important than any social event. You can go alone if you want." Lydia looked from Edward to Constance, assessing the situation. Then her face softened into a calculated expression of understanding. "Of course, my love. Family first, always." She approached and kissed her husband's cheek. "I'm so blessed to have a husband who values family. That's so rare these days." The performative tone was evident to Edward, though perhaps not to someone who didn't know her well. After a few additional photos and empty promises to return the next day with "that special soup you love," "Mrs. Mills," Lydia finally said goodbye. When the sound of her heels disappeared down the corridor, Constance let out a sigh of relief. "I'm sorry about that, Mom." Edward adjusted the elderly woman's pillows. "Don't worry, son. Your wife is a busy young lady." There was a note of resignation in Constance's voice that broke Edward's heart. The afternoon passed slowly. Joanna brought a change of clothes for Edward and a few more things for Constance, promising to return the next day. In the early evening, after a frugal hospital dinner, Constance fell asleep, exhausted by the day's events. Edward sat in the armchair beside the bed, watching his mother's restless sleep. Childhood memories flooded his mind, Constance waking up in the middle of the night to prepare his lunch before school. The nights she arrived exhausted from teaching her classes, but still found energy to help him with homework. Her clothes always clean and ironed, even if old. The pride in her eyes when he entered medical school. How had he allowed this woman, who had dedicated her entire life to him and his brother, to be treated with such indifference in his own home? Shame consumed him. His cell phone vibrated. It was Lydia, sending a photo of herself at the charity dinner, dazzling in her red dress, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by Edward's colleagues. The caption read, "Representing the Mills family at this important event while my husband, a true hero, takes care of our beloved matriarch at the hospital. Zaichi family first, Achiji unconditional love." Edward turned off his phone and put it in his pocket, feeling a mixture of disgust and sadness. The farce that was his marriage became increasingly evident. Lydia lived for appearances, for likes, for the validation of strangers online. The reality behind the perfect photos was a cold, calculating and empty woman. That night, as he watched over his mother's sleep, Edward made a decision. As soon as Constance was discharged, he would install security cameras throughout the house. Not just for security, but to document how Lydia truly treated his mother when he wasn't present. He needed concrete proof before confronting her. He knew his wife's ability to distort facts and manipulate situations well. In the middle of the night, Constance woke up startled, calling for her son. "Edward, the air! I can't breathe!" He jumped up and calmed his mother. "It's okay, Mom. It was just a nightmare. You're in the hospital, you're safe." Constance, still disoriented, grabbed her son's hand. "She left me there on purpose, son." I saw it in her eyes. "It wasn't forgetfulness." The words hit Edward like a lightning bolt. Could it be possible? Had Lydia deliberately left his mother locked in the car? The idea was so monstrous that his mind resisted accepting it. "What do you mean, Mom?" But Constance had already fallen back asleep, too exhausted to elaborate. Edward remained awake for the rest of the night, tormented by the implications of those words. If it were true, it wasn't just negligence, but calculated cruelty. The next morning, Dr. Paul Rivers, Edward's colleague and a geriatric specialist, came to examine Constance. After a thorough assessment, he called Edward to talk privately. "She's recovering well physically, Edward, but I'm concerned about her emotional state. There are clear signs of chronic stress and anxiety. I also noticed some old bruises on her arm and back." "Bruises? Did my mother suffer a fall I don't know about?" Paul hesitated. "She says yes. Small domestic accidents. But the distribution and pattern of the bruises, are inconsistent with simple falls. Some look like grip marks. Edward felt his blood run cold in his veins. Are you suggesting someone intentionally hurt her? I'm not accusing anyone, Edward. I'm just sharing my professional observation. As a doctor and as a friend, Paul placed a hand on his colleague's shoulder. Elderly people are vulnerable. Sometimes they don't report abuse out of shame or fear of causing problems. Edward's mind spun like a whirlwind. Could it be possible that Lydia not only neglected his mother, but also physically mistreated her? The idea was so repulsive that he felt nauseous. I'll investigate this, Paul. Thank you for alerting me. When he returned to the room, Constance was sitting in bed, more awake and flushed. She smiled upon seeing her son, that sweet smile that had always been his safe harbor. Good morning, my son. Forgive yesterday's scare. I'm feeling much better already. Edward sat beside her, carefully choosing his words. Mom, I need to ask you something important. Have you been suffering falls or accidents at home? Constance's smile wavered slightly. Oh, you know how clumsy I am, son. Sometimes I trip, bump into furniture. And do these accidents happen when I'm home or when I'm at the clinic? Constance looked away. Usually when you're working. I don't want to bother you with such nonsense. Edward gently took his mother's arm and lifted the sleeve of her hospital gown, revealing purplish, finger-shaped marks. This doesn't look like a trip, Mom. It looks like someone squeezed your arm hard. Tears began to form in the elderly woman's eyes. Please, son, I don't want to cause trouble. Your wife already has so much difficulty accepting me. She just gets nervous sometimes. The confirmation of what Edward already suspected hit him like a punch to the stomach. Lydia not only neglected his mother, she physically assaulted her. The woman who presented herself to the world as a symbol of empathy and positivity hid a monstrous face that only the most vulnerable in her home knew. This ends today. Mom, I promise you. 2 days later, Constance was discharged from the hospital. Edward had arranged everything for her return home to be as comfortable as possible. On the way, he drove slowly, avoiding potholes and speed bumps, while his mother watched the landscape through the window. The Phoenix sky displayed an intense blue with no clouds in sight, and the sun continued relentlessly over the young capital. You'll be staying in the downstairs guest room from now on, Edward explained, breaking the silence. It will be cooler and more comfortable. I've already asked Joanna to arrange everything. But son, isn't that your office? Where will you work? I can use the upstairs office. The priority now is your comfort and safety. Constance noticed something different in her son's voice, a determination that hadn't been there before. Since their conversation at the hospital about the bruises, Edward seemed transformed, as if a blindfold had been removed from his eyes. And Lydia? What did she think of this change? Edward gripped the steering wheel tighter. She doesn't need to approve decisions about my own mother. Upon arriving home, Joanna was waiting for them at the entrance, her face lit up by a genuine smile at seeing Mrs. Mills. The maid had meticulously prepared the old office, fresh flowers on the small table, new sheets on the bed, and a small television installed facing the comfortable armchair in the corner. Welcome back, Mrs. Mills. The Oklahoma native hugged the elderly woman affectionately. We missed you terribly. Thank you, Joanna. You're always so thoughtful. Constance looked around, appreciating the details. But where is Lydia? Mrs. Morris left very early. She said she had an advertising campaign to film at Lake Pleasant Shore, Joanna replied, exchanging a significant look with Edward. An advertising campaign, Edward repeated dryly. Priorities. As they helped Constance settle in, Edward's phone rang. It was Matthew, the security technician he had hired the day before. Dr. Mills? We're on our way with the equipment. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Perfect. Thank you, Matthew. Hanging up the phone, Edward turned to his mother. I'm installing a security system in the house today. Cameras, sensors, all state-of-the-art. Is that necessary, son? We've never had security problems here in the estate. Edward sat on the edge of the bed. Yes, it is necessary, Mom, for several reasons. What he didn't say was that the cameras would be strategically positioned to capture not only possible external invaders, but primarily Lydia's behavior inside the house. He needed concrete proof of what happened when he wasn't present. An hour later, Matthew and his team had installed discrete cameras at strategic points: living room, kitchen, hallways, pool area, and garage. all connected to an app on Edward's cell phone, allowing him to monitor the house from anywhere. I set everything up as you requested. Doctor, Matthew explained, demonstrating the system's operation. Recordings are stored in the cloud for 30 days, and the notification system alerts you if it detects suspicious movements at programmed times. Edward thanked him and paid for the service. As soon as the team left, Joanna cautiously approached. Doctor, can I ask you something? So, of course, Joanna. These cameras, are they to watch Mrs. Morris, aren't they? Edward hesitated but nodded. I need to know what happens in this house when I'm not present. You yourself have seen how she treats my mother. Joanna looked around as if checking if no one else was nearby, and then spoke in a low voice. Doctor, there's something else you need to know. On the day Mrs. Mills went to the hospital, I saw Mrs. Morris go upstairs. She wasn't making videos the whole time, no. She came back down to the garage about 10 minutes later, looked at the car, saw your mother inside, and went back upstairs. I'm sure she saw the situation and did nothing. The revelation hit Edward like a lightning bolt. So it wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate cruelty. His wife had seen her mother-in-law in distress and simply ignored it, returning to her precious social media videos. Why didn't you tell me this before, Joanna? I was scared, Doctor. Mrs. Morris has threatened to fire me several times. I need this job to support my children. Tears began to form in the maid's eyes, but after seeing Mrs. Mills in that state at the hospital, I can't stay silent anymore. Edward hugged Joanna, grateful for her honesty. Don't worry. Your job is guaranteed, and you did the right thing by telling me. In the afternoon, while Constance rested and Joanna prepared dinner, Edward reviewed the camera settings on his cell phone. The system was working perfectly. Now it was a matter of waiting and observing. The sound of the front door opening announced Lydia's arrival. She entered carrying shopping bags, her face impeccably made up despite the heat, wearing a designer athletic outfit that probably cost half of Joanna's monthly salary. Darling, so glad you're home, Lydia exclaimed upon seeing Edward, placing the bags on the sofa and approaching to kiss him. He accepted the kiss coldly, observing her with new eyes. How had he never noticed the falseness behind that perfect smile? Where is Mrs. Mills? I brought her a little gift. Lydia rummaged in one of the bags, pulling out a small box wrapped in colourful paper. My mother is resting in the new room, the old office. New room? Lydia frowned. Why did she change rooms without consulting me? I decided to move her to the ground floor. It's more accessible and comfortable for her. But that's your office. Where will you work now? And why didn't you talk to me first? This house is mine too, Edward. Her indignation seemed genuine, as if Constance's well-being was secondary to her authority over the house's decor. As you always say on your social media, family first, Edward replied, the irony barely disguised in his voice. Lydia seemed not to notice the sarcasm. Exactly. That's what I always say. Family is everything. She took her phone out of her bag. Shall we record a video with Mrs. Mills when she wakes up? My followers are super worried. I've received hundreds of messages asking about her. No, Lydia, my mother needs to rest, not be exposed on your networks. But it would be so positive to show her recovery. We could talk about elderly care, heat stroke prevention. It would be educational content. Edward took a deep breath, suppressing his anger. I said no. And by the way, I installed a security system in the house today. Lydia looked around, noticing the small, discreet cameras for the first time. Cameras? Why? This estate is already super secure. It's never secure enough, Edward replied dryly. And not all dangers come from outside. The last sentence made Lydia stare at him for a few seconds, a flash of understanding passing through her eyes. But she soon smiled, returning to her carefree persona. You're always so protective. That's why I love you so much. She walked around the living room, examining the cameras. I just hope they caught my good angle, she joked, posing as if in a photo shoot. Dinner was tense. Constance, still fragile, ate little and in silence. Lydia dominated the conversation, talking incessantly about the new advertising campaign, the partnership proposals she had received, and her plans to expand her digital empire, as she called it. I'm thinking of creating my own product line. Something with my signature, you know? Lydia Morris, Authentic Beauty. What do you think? Authentic is the last word I would use, Edward murmured, too low for her to hear. After dinner, Lydia announced that she was going to take a bath and prepare content to post the next day. As soon as she went upstairs, Edward helped his mother settle into the new room. "Are you comfortable here, Mum?" "Yes, son. Much better than upstairs. But I'm worried. Lydia didn't seem happy with the change. Don't worry about her. This is my house too, and I want you well settled." Edward adjusted her pillows and checked that her medicines were organized on the bedside table. Before leaving, he kissed his mother's forehead. "Sleep well, Mom. If you need anything, just press this button." He showed her a small emergency device he had installed. "It alerts me immediately if you need anything. You've always taken such good care of me, son, since you were little. I'm just returning the favor, Mom. You dedicated your life to me and Raphael. Now it's our turn to take care of you." On his way out, Edward encountered Joanna, who was waiting discreetly in the hallway. "Doctor, something strange is happening upstairs." "What do you mean?" "Mrs. Morris is in your room talking on the phone. She seemed very agitated, speaking softly but angrily. I managed to hear when I passed to put away the towels. She said something like, 'It didn't work this time, but I need to get rid of her soon.'" Edward felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you sure of what you heard, Joanna?" "Absolutely, Doctor. And there's more." She told the person on the other end of the line that if the old woman continued to be a nuisance, she would have to take more drastic measures. Edward's blood ran cold in his veins. The implications of those words were too terrible to contemplate. His wife not only mistreated his mother, she seemed to be planning something much worse. "Thank you for letting me know, Joanna. You can go home now. We'll talk more tomorrow." As soon as the maid left, Edward went to the upstairs office, which he would now use as his workspace. He turned on the computer and accessed the camera system, reviewing the day's recordings. He needed concrete proof before confronting Lydia. In the images, he saw his wife entering the room that now belonged to Constance when the elderly woman was in the shower. Lydia seemed to be looking for something in the drawers and closet. In another recording, she was in the kitchen, observing Constance's medicines that were separated in a pill dispenser, with a thoughtful and somber expression. The most disturbing, however, was the garage recording, captured hours before the incident that sent his mother to the hospital. The images clearly showed Lydia leading Constance to the car, helping her get in, closing the door, and then, the moment that confirmed all of Edward's suspicions, deliberately pressing the central lock button, looking at her mother-in-law inside the vehicle with an indecipherable expression before going up to the apartment. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been forgetfulness. Lydia had intentionally locked his mother inside the car, knowing exactly what the Phoenix heat could cause. Edward felt nauseous. The woman with whom he shared a bed had tried to hurt, perhaps even eliminate, his mother. The influencer who preached love and positivity to millions of followers was capable of calculated cruelty against a defenseless elderly woman. He saved all the videos to a secure device and closed the laptop. The decision was made. He would confront Lydia, but not now. He needed a more elaborate plan, something that would not only expose the truth, but also definitively protect his mother. In the bedroom, he found Lydia sitting at the vanity, applying her night cream while recording the process for her followers. And remember, darling, self-care is not selfishness. It's a necessity. Good night and dream beautiful dreams. She ended the recording and smiled at her husband, through the mirror's reflection. "I was just talking about you in my video tomorrow, about how important it is to have a partner who supports our dreams." Edward watched her in silence. How could someone be so fake, so empty inside, and yet maintain such a convincing facade of perfection? "Something wrong, darling?" Lydia asked, noticing his fixed gaze. "Nothing," Edward replied, lying on the bed. "I was just thinking about how appearances can be deceiving." The next morning dawned with the Phoenix sky displaying an intense blue, without a single cloud promising relief from the relentless heat that punished the Arizona capital. Edward woke up early, even before Lydia stirred. He went to his mother's room and found her sleeping peacefully. For a moment he stood there, observing the wrinkled face that had so often smiled at him during his difficult childhood in Flagstaff. A wave of determination washed over him. He would not allow any more harm to come to the woman who had dedicated her life to raising her children alone. In the kitchen, he found Joanna already preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Doctor," the maid spoke in a low voice. Is Mrs. Mills still sleeping? Yes, and it's best to let her rest a little longer. I need to talk to you, Joanna. They sat at the kitchen table, far enough from Constance's room and the upstairs where Lydia was still sleeping. Joanna, I saw the security camera recordings. Edward's voice was grave. Lydia locked my mother in the car on purpose. It wasn't an accident. The maid covered her mouth with her hand, shocked even though she had suspected the possibility. My God, Doctor, how can someone do that to an elderly woman? I also found other disturbing things. She's been entering my mother's room when no one is looking, messing with her medicines. Edward ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. I need your help, Joanna. I'm going to confront Lydia, but I want you to keep an eye on my mother during this. Do not leave her alone with Lydia under any circumstances. You can count on me, Doctor. Mrs. Mills is like family to me. Edward squeezed the maid's hand, grateful for her loyalty. Thank you. And one more thing. If you notice any suspicious behavior from Lydia, let me know immediately. At that moment, they heard the sound of heels in the hallway. Lydia appeared in the kitchen, impeccably dressed and made up despite the early hour. She wore a designer athletic set, although everyone knew she hated exercise and only went to the gym to take photos. Good morning, family. Her voice sounded too cheerful, as if she were recording one of her motivational videos. What a beautiful day. Perfect for renewing energy and being grateful for blessings. Edward and Joanna exchanged a quick glance. Coffee, Mrs. Morris? Joanna offered, already pouring a cup. Just a little and no sugar. I'm on a new detox diet. Lydia sat next to her husband, kissing him on the cheek. Did you sleep well, darling? You got out of bed early. I went to check on my mother. Oh, of course. How is she? I haven't been able to visit her in the new room yet. Lydia fiddled with her phone as she spoke, checking her social media notifications. She's recovering well. Thank you for asking. Edward's dry tone made Lydia lift her eyes from her phone, frowning slightly. Is everything all right, Edward? You seem different. I'm perfectly fine. Just thoughtful. Thoughtful about what? Edward took a sip of coffee, observing his wife over the rim of the cup. About how people can be different from what they appear. An uncomfortable silence hung over the kitchen. Joanna pretended to be busy at the sink, but her ears were attentive to the conversation. Is that a dig at me? Lydia asked, her smile wavering slightly. Interpret it as you wish. Edward stood up. I have a meeting at the hospital shortly. I shouldn't be long, but it's Saturday. Emergencies don't respect weekends. He picked up his car keys. Joanna, please take good care of my mother. Don't leave her alone. The emphatic look he gave the maid communicated much more than his words. You can count on me. Doctor. Lydia watched her husband leave, a slight discomfort growing in her chest. There was something in his behavior she couldn't decipher, a calculated coldness she had never seen before. As soon as Edward left, Lydia turned to Joanna. What's wrong with him? He's been acting strange since yesterday. I don't know, Mrs. Morris. Maybe he's worried about his mother. Of course he's worried. We all are. Lydia stood up, adjusting her perfectly straightened hair. I'm going to record some content by the pool area. If Mrs. Mills wakes up, let me know. I want to show my followers how well I'm taking care of my dear mother-in-law. Joanna just nodded, watching as her employer walked out, swaying her hips as if on a runway. In truth, Edward had no meeting at the hospital. He drove to the office of Raphael Mills, his younger brother, who worked as a lawyer specializing in digital law and cybercrime. Raphael had recently returned from Los Angeles, California, where he had built a solid career, to open his own office in Phoenix. So she did it deliberately? Raphael asked, shocked after watching the videos Edward had brought. She locked our mother in the car knowing she could have... Yes, Edward completed, and from what Joanna heard, she's planning something worse. The two brothers, sitting in the private office, stared at the laptop showing the evidence of Lydia's cruelty. Raphael, younger than Edward, had inherited their mother's same brown eyes and strong jaw. He had always been more impulsive than his brother, and now struggled to contain his anger. We need to report this to the police immediately. It's not that simple, Raphael. Edward leaned back in his chair. Lydia is a public figure. She has millions of followers. Her legal team is aggressive. She'll try to discredit the accusations, turn everything into a media circus, and our mother will suffer even more from the exposure. So, what do you suggest? Let this psychopath continue living with you near our mother. Of course not. Edward leaned forward. I have a plan and I need your legal help to execute it. We're going to expose Lydia, but in her own way, through social media. Raphael listened attentively as his brother explained his strategy. When Edward finished, a dark smile formed on the lawyer's lips. It's risky, but it could work. She'll fall from the pedestal she built. Exactly, and we'll make sure the fall is irreversible. Back at the house, Edward found Constance awake, sitting on the porch of the new room, watching the garden. Joanna had prepared iced lemon balm tea to refresh the elderly woman in the persistent heat. How are you feeling today, Mum? Edward sat beside her, holding her hand. Better, son. This room is a blessing. Cooler, quieter. She smiled, her tired eyes still reflecting the kindness that had always characterized her. I saw Lydia filming outside. She looked so beautiful in that colorful outfit. Yes, always impeccable for the cameras. Edward's tone was bitter. Constance watched her son for a moment. Something's bothering you, isn't it? Nothing you should worry about. Edward forced a smile. Where is Lydia now? She left. Said she had a lunch with sponsors. She seemed in a hurry. Edward nodded, feeling a mix of relief and tension. Lydia's absence would give him time to finalize his plan's preparations. But the idea of confronting her when she returned made him anxious. In the afternoon, while Constance rested, Edward reviewed all the camera recordings, carefully selecting those that most clearly showed Lydia's cruel behavior. Besides the car incident, there were images of her ignoring Constance's calls for help, hiding the elderly woman's medicines, and even accidentally spilling hot water very close to her mother-in-law's feet. The body of evidence was disturbing. The woman Edward thought he knew, the influencer who preached empathy and family love, was in reality a calculating and cruel person, capable of hurting a defenseless elderly woman to get rid of what she considered a nuisance in her perfect life. As the sun began to set, painting the Phoenix sky with orange hues, Edward heard the sound of Lydia's car parking in the garage. The moment of confrontation had arrived. He took a deep breath, checked if Constance was still sleeping peacefully, and went downstairs to meet his wife. Lydia entered carrying several shopping bags, her face radiant after a day of adulation and pampering from sponsors. Edward! So glad you're home. She placed the bags on the sofa. I have wonderful news. The cosmetics brand wants to renew the contract with double the value, and I've been invited to be an ambassador for a line of fitness clothing. That's great, he replied without enthusiasm. We need to talk, Lydia. She stopped rummaging in the bags, finally noticing her husband's serious tone. Did something happen? Did your mother get worse? No, fortunately she's recovering well despite everything. Despite everything? What do you mean by that? Edward indicated the sofa. Please sit down. Lydia obeyed, a slight frown revealing her confusion. Edward remained standing, arms crossed, studying the woman he had once loved, and in whom he now saw only a stranger. How long have we been married, Lydia? 5 years in October. Why? And in all that time I don't think I ever truly knew you. Not your real self. Lydia shifted on the sofa, uncomfortable. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this. Edward picked up the tablet from the coffee table and showed her the garage video captured on the day of the incident. The images clearly showed Lydia deliberately locking Constance in the car before going up to the apartment. Lydia's face paled, but she quickly regained her composure. That means nothing. I always lock the car for safety. It was a habit, a reflex. A reflex? Edward moved to the next video, which showed Lydia returning to the garage 10 minutes later, looking inside the car where Constance was already showing signs of discomfort, and simply turning around, going back to the apartment. And was that also a reflex? Seeing my mother unwell and ignoring her? Lydia stood up abruptly. Are you spying on me? Did you install cameras to watch me? I installed cameras to protect my family, and apparently it was necessary. That's an invasion of privacy. You had no right. And you had no right to harm my mother. Edward's voice was icy. I have more videos, Lydia. Several of them. You hiding her medicines, ignoring her pleas for help, and even... He swallowed hard, anger almost choking his words, even deliberately spilling hot water near her feet. Lydia was silent for a moment, her mind working quickly. Then her face transformed, adopting an expression of an unjustly wronged victim, that Edward knew well from her dramatic social media videos. "You're twisting everything, Edward. It's not what you're thinking at all." Tears began to well up in her eyes. "I love your mother. I've taken care of her as if she were my own mother." "Spare me the dramatics, Lydia. Your crocodile tears may work with your followers, but not with me. Not anymore." "Dramatics? How can you say that? I'm genuinely hurt by your accusations." She approached, trying to touch his arm, but Edward recoiled. "Edward, please. We're family. I've been trying my best to take care of your mother, but it's not easy. She's difficult sometimes." The audacity of the lie made Edward's blood boil. "My mother is the kindest, most patient person I know. She never complained about anything, even when you treated her like an unwanted piece of furniture. And now you try to blame her." "I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying that maybe things aren't exactly as they seem in the videos. They only show fragments, not the full context." Edward smiled humorlessly. "Funny you talk about context, when your whole life is based on carefully selected fragments for your social media. The perfect influencer, the dedicated daughter-in-law, the loving wife. All lies, all performance." Lydia changed tactics, her face hardening. "What do you want, Edward? Money? Do you want to blackmail me with these videos?" "I want the truth, Lydia. Admit what you did. Admit you tried to deliberately harm my mother." "That's ridiculous. Why would I do something like that?" "Why, because you see her as a nuisance. An obstacle to your perfect superficial life. She doesn't fit the aesthetic you sell, does she? An elderly woman with health problems doesn't generate enough likes, unless you can use her as a prop to show how charitable you are." The words hit Lydia like slaps. She recoiled, sitting back on the sofa, the mask of indignation beginning to slip. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked, her voice lower. "Show these videos to whom?" "To everyone." Lydia's eyes widened. "You wouldn't do that. Why not? Don't you always say we should share our truth, that we should be authentic online? That would destroy my career. Everything I've built." "A career built on lies deserves to be destroyed." Lydia stood up again, now visibly shaken. "You can't do this to me, Edward. Think of the scandal, the exposure. Your mother would also be affected. I've thought of everything. And unlike you, I've already taken steps to protect my mother." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Edward walked to the door and opened it. Raphael entered, accompanied by a woman Lydia immediately recognized, Dr. Camilla Vance, one of Phoenix's most respected lawyers. "What's going on here?" Lydia asked, her tone now defensive. "Why did you bring your brother and a lawyer to our house?" Raphael entered, placing a briefcase on the table. "I'm here to protect my mother's interests, Lydia, and Dr. Vance will ensure everything is done within the law." Lydia looked from one brother to the other, comprehension slowly dawning on her face. She was cornered. The air in the apartment seemed to have become dense, almost unbreathable. Lydia looked from Edward to Raphael and the lawyer, feeling cornered. Her mind worked frantically, searching for an escape. "This is ridiculous," she finally said, crossing her arms. "You're making a drama out of nothing. Any misunderstanding between me and Mrs. Mills can be resolved within the family, without the need for lawyers." Dr. Camilla Vance, a middle-aged woman with elegantly cut grey hair in a bob, adjusted her glasses on her nose and spoke in a calm, yet firm voice. "Mrs. Morris, I have reviewed the evidence provided by Dr. Edward, and we are facing a serious case of elder abuse. Under normal circumstances, this would be taken directly to the specialized police department." "Abuse?" Lydia let out a forced laugh. "That's absurd. I love my mother-in-law. Every week I post photos of us together on social media." "Posting photos is not the same as caring," Raphael interjected, his indignation barely contained in his voice. "The cameras don't lie, Lydia. We saw how you treat our mother when no one is watching." Lydia turned to Edward, changing tactics. Her face softened, her eyes moistened, and she took a step towards her husband. "Edward, my love, you know me. You know I wouldn't be capable of harming anyone, much less your mother. We have our disagreements like any family, but to say I'm abusive," her voice faltered theatrically, "that deeply hurts me." Edward remained impassive. "The cameras don't lie, Lydia, and Joanna confirmed everything we suspected." The mention of Joanna made Lydia's face harden for a second. "That meddling maid? She's always been jealous of me, always tried to turn your mother against me." "Joanna has been more of a daughter to my mother than you ever were." Edward replied coldly. And now we have two options. Dr. Camilla opened the briefcase she had brought and took out some documents. The first option is to take the case to court, a criminal lawsuit for elder abuse, with possible developments in the civil sphere for emotional damages. The evidence is compelling, and as a lawyer, I must inform you that the chance of conviction is high. Lydia paled. The mention of a criminal lawsuit made her stomach churn. The entire digital empire she had built, the millionaire contracts with brands, the image of a perfect influencer, everything would crumble with a scandal of this magnitude. And the second option? She asked in a trembling voice. Edward sat on the sofa, staring at the woman he had once believed he loved. You sign the divorce today, accept the terms we set, and leave this house immediately. Without contestation, without drama, Raphael pushed another document across the table. The terms are fair. You keep your personal assets, your social media, and your company. Edward waives any participation in your future profits. In return, you renounce any rights to this house and commit to never contacting our mother again. Lydia took the document, flipping through it quickly. This is acceptable, but what about the videos? Are you still going to release them? It depends on you, Edward replied. If you accept the terms and leave discreetly, I will keep the recordings confidential. A spark of relief passed through Lydia's eyes. Perhaps there was a less catastrophic way out after all. She could reinvent her online narrative, perhaps as a strong, independent woman after the divorce. Her followers would love the story of overcoming adversity. I need time to think and consult my lawyer. There's no time to think, Raphael stated emphatically. Either you sign now or tomorrow we file the lawsuit and the videos leak. The ultimatum made Lydia harden. The victim mask fell completely, revealing the calculating woman behind the facade. You can't force me to do anything. This is coercion. It's not coercion to offer legal alternatives, Dr. Camilla calmly responded. We are merely presenting options within the law. The choice is yours. Lydia stood up, pacing the room like a caged beast. Suddenly, she stopped and stared at Edward with cold eyes. You know what your problem is, Edward? You never saw the value of what I built. Billions of people admire me. Brands compete for my attention. I'm a reference in style and behavior. And you, an ordinary doctor from a provincial city. Without me, you're nobody. Edward smiled sadly. You still don't understand, do you? Your entire life is based on appearances, on the approval of strangers online. What you built is nothing more than an empty facade. Without filters and edits, what's left? The words hit Lydia like arrows. For a brief moment, her gaze wavered, as if she glimpsed the truth in her husband's words. But soon her expression hardened again. I'm not signing anything today. I need to consult my lawyer. All right. Edward stood up, heading to the computer on the living room desk. Then we proceed with option 2. He turned on the computer and opened a file. The screen showed Lydia's Instagram page, with her millions of followers. Edward had the password, as he often helped his wife with technical issues related to her social media. What are you doing? Lydia asked, alarmed. Sharing the truth with your followers. Isn't that what you always preach? Authenticity. Edward clicked New Post and began attaching the security camera videos. The first showed Lydia deliberately locking Constance in the car. The second, her returning, seeing her mother-in-law in distress and ignoring her. The third, her hiding the elderly woman's medicines. Stop! Lydia screamed, running towards him. You can't do this! You'll destroy everything. You tried to hurt my mother, Lydia. You almost succeeded. Do you really think you deserve protection? Edward's finger hovered over the post button. Lydia looked at the screen, at the videos that evidenced her cruel behavior, and then at the divorce papers on the table. All right, she finally said, defeated. I'll sign. 30 minutes later, with the documents duly signed and acknowledged by the lawyer, Lydia went upstairs to pack some bags. Edward and Raphael remained in the living room, relieved to have resolved the situation without further scandal, especially considering Constance's health. Are you sure you don't want to expose everything? Raphael asked, still indignant at his former sister-in-law's behavior. She deserves to be publicly unmasked. I don't want to subject our mother to that kind of exposure, Edward replied. The important thing is that Lydia leaves our lives. The rest, time will take care of. Upstairs, while putting some clothes in her suitcase, Lydia seethed with rage. The humiliation of being expelled from her own home, of having her behavior exposed in videos, of being threatened with lawsuits. It was too much for her pride. They think they can defeat me so easily, she muttered to herself, picking up her phone. No one threatens Lydia Morris and gets away with it. With fingers trembling with fury, she opened the video app and began to record. "Hello? My loves," she began, artificial tears welling in her eyes. "I need to share something very painful with you today. Something I never imagined having to expose publicly." 20 minutes later, Lydia came downstairs dragging 2 suitcases. Her face was streaked with tears, but a victorious smile played at the corner of her lips. "I'm going to a hotel," she announced coldly. "I'll send for the rest of my things tomorrow." Edward nodded without saying a word. Raphael escorted Lydia to the door more to ensure she really left than out of courtesy. When the door closed, the brothers exchanged a look of relief. "It's over," Raphael said. "I hope so," Edward replied, though something in Lydia's final behavior left him uneasy. The afternoon was already fading when Edward went to check on Constance. The elderly woman had woken from her nap and was chatting quietly with Joanna, who was serving her tea. "Son," Constance smiled upon seeing him, "I was just telling Joanna about when you were little and wanted to be an astronaut." Edward sat beside his mother, holding her wrinkled hands. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Lydia won't be living with us anymore. We're getting a divorce." Constance's smile disappeared, replaced by a worried expression. "Oh, son. Was it because of me? I always knew she didn't like me living here. If I go back to Flagstaff—" "No, Mom, absolutely not," Edward interrupted. "You are not to blame for anything. Lydia and I have been distant for a long time. This just accelerated the inevitable." Joanna, who knew the whole truth, exchanged a significant look with Edward. Both had agreed to spare Constance the more sordid details of the situation. "You'll stay here with me," Edward continued. "This is your home now." Constance squeezed her son's hand, her eyes teary. "You've always been a good boy, Edward. Always took care of everyone around you." The night passed peacefully. Edward, emotionally exhausted, fell asleep early. He was woken at 3 in the morning by the persistent ringing of his cell phone. It was Raphael. "Edward, you need to see this," his brother's voice sounded urgent. "Lydia posted a video on social media. It's viral." Completely awake now, Edward got up and went to his computer. He opened Instagram and found the video Lydia had published a few hours earlier. It already had millions of views and thousands of comments. In the video, a tearful Lydia with strategically smudged makeup recounted a completely distorted version of the facts. According to her, she was being kicked out of her home by her controlling husband, who couldn't accept her professional success. Worse still, she accused Edward and Joanna of mistreating Constance and then trying to blame her. "They edited videos to incriminate me," she said between sobs. "I'm afraid of what they might do to my dear mother-in-law. Edward has always been jealous and possessive, but I never imagined he would go this far." The falsehood was so absurd that Edward felt nauseous. Lydia had completely twisted the story, painting herself as the victim and him as the villain. The comments under the video were a flood of support for her and hatred directed at Edward. Furious followers promised to boycott his clinic. Others suggested reporting him to the medical board. The hashtag #StandWithLydia was already trending. "My God," Edward murmured, running a hand over his face. His phone rang again. It was Paul Rivers, the doctor who had treated Constance at the hospital. "Edward, did you see what's happening? The hospital is receiving dozens of calls. Journalists are trying to contact me to confirm if I treated your mother with suspicious injuries." "Paul, you know that's a lie. My mother's bruises were caused by Lydia, not by me." "I know, Edward. I'm on your side. But the situation is getting out of control. The hospital administration is concerned about the repercussions." After hanging up, Edward sat in the dark, trying to process the turnaround. Lydia had been faster and smarter. Using her platform and influence, she had managed to turn the tables, transforming herself from villain to victim with a single emotionally manipulative video. The phone rang once more. It was Raphael. "We need to act now," the lawyer said. "She caught us off guard, but we have the real evidence. Let's release the original videos." "What about Mom?" "This will expose her to public scrutiny." "Edward, we have no choice. Lydia has already exposed her. The difference is that she's telling a false version. We need to show the truth. After a few moments of reflection, Edward agreed. "All right, do it." While Raphael took care of preparing an official response, Edward went to check on his mother. To his relief, Constance slept soundly, oblivious to the chaos unfolding on social media. He offered a silent prayer, asking that she continue to be protected from all that mudslinging. Back in his room, Edward accessed his own social media profiles, rarely used, and began to write a response to Lydia's video. It was time to show the world who the perfect influencer really was behind the cameras. "I never intended to expose my personal life this way," he began. "But in light of the serious falsehood spread by my ex-wife Lydia Morris, I have no choice but to present the truth, however painful it may be." He attached the original security camera videos, unedited or manipulated, clearly showing Lydia's cruel behavior towards Constance. He also added Paul Rivers's medical report, documenting the bruises and other signs of mistreatment found on the elderly woman. Before publishing, Edward hesitated for a moment. Exposing Lydia this way meant entering a public war, something he had always avoided. But the alternative, allowing her to continue spreading lies about him and possibly harming his mother, was unacceptable. With a deep sigh, he clicked publish. The media explosion that followed was unprecedented in Phoenix. Within hours, the videos published by Edward went viral, reaching far beyond Lydia's 2 million followers. The authenticity of the images left no room for doubt. The influencer, who had built a career preaching love, empathy, and family respect, had deliberately put her elderly mother-in-law's life at risk. The digital confrontation gained national proportions. Hashtags like Ciao Lydia cancelled and Justice for Mrs. Mills dominated trends. Television programs dedicated entire segments to the case. Digital ethics specialists were called to debate the abyss between the online persona and the real behavior of influencers. In her hotel room, Lydia watched in horror as her digital empire crumbled. Brands rushed to terminate contracts, publicly declaring that they did not condone any form of elder abuse. Followers who hours earlier had fervently defended her now attacked her with equal intensity. Comments like fake as monster and hypocrite flooded her old posts. Desperate, she tried one last card, publishing a new tearful video claiming that the images released by Edward were manipulated. But it was too late. Public opinion had already formed, and the social media court had delivered its verdict: guilty. At the Mills home, Edward kept Constance protected from the media storm. With the help of Joanna and Raphael, he had created a bubble around the elderly woman, preventing her from accessing television, radio, or any internet-connected device. "I don't understand why I have to go without my little show," Constance sweetly complained, as Edward took her for a walk in the garden. "It's only for a few days. Mom, there's been a lot of disturbing news lately. I prefer to spare you." The house garden, with its leafy trees and colorful flowers, offered a peaceful refuge amidst the chaos. Constance walked slowly, leaning on her son's arm, gradually regaining her strength after the traumatic car incident. "Lydia doesn't visit us anymore?" she asked suddenly, her voice carrying an innocence that broke Edward's heart. "No, Mom, as I said, we're separating." Constance nodded without pressing for more details. Deep down, perhaps she understood more than she let on. The physical marks of mistreatment might be disappearing from her body, but the emotional scars would remain for a long time. That night, while Constance slept peacefully in her new downstairs room, Edward met with Raphael and Joanna in the living room to discuss the developments of the case. "The Adult Protective Services contacted me today," Raphael informed, flipping through some documents. "They want to open a formal inquiry against Lydia, regardless of whether we file a complaint." Edward sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to expose our mother to a judicial process. Depositions, hearings, it would be exhausting for her." "I understand your concern," Raphael replied, "but it might be necessary to protect other elderly people. The case has taken on a dimension that transcends our family." Joanna, who was listening attentively, spoke up. "Mrs. Mills is stronger than you imagine. She perceives much more than she shows." Edward looked thoughtfully out the window, observing the lights of Phoenix in the distance. Lake Pleasant reflected the full moon, creating a serene landscape that contrasted with the turbulence of his thoughts. "Let's wait a few days before making any decision," he finally concluded. The priority now is Mum's recovery, both physical and emotional. The next morning, Edward was woken by a call from Paul Rivers. "Edward, I have a proposal for you," the doctor said without preamble. "The hospital is organizing a symposium on geriatric care, with a special focus on preventing elder abuse. We'd like you to be one of the speakers." The proposal took Edward by surprise. "Me, but I'm a cardiologist, not a geriatrician." "Precisely. Your personal experience, combined with your medical knowledge, offers a unique perspective. Plus," Paul hesitated briefly, "it would be a way to reframe this painful experience, transforming it into something positive." Edward promised to think about it. After hanging up, he found Constance already awake. Sitting on her room's porch, watching the birds visiting the feeder Joanna had specially installed for her. "Good morning." "Mom?" Edward kissed her forehead. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a rock," she replied, smiling. "This room is a blessing." "No stairs, cool." Edward sat beside her, enjoying the moment of tranquility. Suddenly Constance turned to him, her eyes revealing a sharp lucidity that often went unnoticed. "Son, I think it's time you told me what really happened with Lydia." Edward felt his heart race. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I'm not foolish, Edward. Joanna turns off the television when I enter the living room. Raphael changes the subject when I mention your wife. And you—" She affectionately squeezed her son's hand. "You have that same sad look you had as a boy, when you tried to hide something to protect me." His mother's perceptiveness should not surprise him. After all, she had raised 2 children alone, faced difficulties that many would succumb to, and always maintained admirable dignity. Constance might be elderly, but she had never been fragile. "Mom, it's complicated. Life is always complicated, son. But we face complications better when we know the truth." Edward took a deep breath and, with carefully chosen words, told his mother about Lydia's behavior, the camera evidence, and the subsequent public exposure. He omitted the crueler details, but was honest enough for Constance to understand the seriousness of the situation. When he finished, he anxiously awaited his mother's reaction. To his surprise, Constance did not seem shocked or hurt. There was a serenity in her expression that conveyed not resignation, but acceptance. "I knew," she said simply. "Maybe not all the details, but I felt there was something wrong with the way she looked at me when you weren't around." "Why did you never tell me, Mum?" "Because you loved her, son. Or at least you loved the person you believed her to be. I didn't want to be responsible for opening your eyes." The wisdom in Constance's words touched Edward deeply. His mother had endured mistreatment in silence to protect him, just as he now tried to protect her from the complete truth. "Do you know what I learned in my 72 years of life?" Constance continued, looking at the garden trees. "That the truth always finds its way to the light sooner or later. We cannot protect those we love from reality, only be by their side when it reveals itself." Edward hugged his mother, feeling a mixture of admiration and gratitude. "You're incredible, you know." "No, I'm not," she laughed softly. "I've just lived long enough to learn a few lessons. And the most important of them is that true love doesn't need filters or poses for social media. It reveals itself in small daily actions, in simple gestures of care." In the following weeks, while the case still resonated in the media, life in the Mills home gradually settled into a new rhythm. Edward reorganized his clinic hours to spend more time at home. Raphael visited almost daily, often bringing Marianne, his girlfriend, who quickly developed a special affection for Constance. Joanna, who was once just the maid, officially became part of the family. Edward offered her a better contract and the possibility of bringing her 2 teenage children to live in a small house at the back of the property. "Doctor, that's not necessary," Joanna protested, emotional about the offer. "It's more than necessary, Joanna. You saved my mother. I can never fully repay you." The house, once decorated according to the trends dictated by Lydia for her social media posts, gradually transformed into a true home. Family photos replaced expensive abstract paintings. Real plants took the place of artificial, more photogenic ones. The kitchen, once a setting for healthy recipe videos that Lydia never actually prepared, became the heart of the home, where Joanna taught traditional Oklahoma recipes to Constance. Edward accepted the invitation to speak at the Geriatric Care Symposium. His presentation, titled beyond vital signs recognizing indicators of abuse in elderly patients, was a success, moving many healthcare professionals to tears with his personal account. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, when the Phoenix heat offered a truce, Edward took his mother for a special outing. They visited the municipal school, where she had taught for decades in Flagstaff before retiring. To Constance's surprise, a plaque with her name had been installed in the school library. Professor Constance Mills, educating with love and dedication for 35 years. The tribute, discreetly organized by Edward and his mother's former students, brought tears to the elderly woman's eyes. "I don't deserve all this," she said, moved. "You deserve this and much more," Edward replied, hugging her. "You dedicated your life to educating generations of students. Many of them today are doctors, teachers, lawyers, all carrying a little of what they learned from you." On the way back home, they passed by the lake, where the sunset painted the Phoenix sky with orange and purple hues. They sat on a bench by the water, enjoying the natural spectacle. "You know, son," Constance broke the contemplative silence, "sometimes the bad things that happen to us serve to open our eyes to what really matters." Edward looked at his mother, admiring how she managed to find wisdom even in the most painful experiences. "What happened with Lydia," she continued, "was terrible. But look at the good it brought. You're more present, Raphael visits more, Joanna and her children now have a better home. Sometimes we need to lose something to value what was always there." Edward reflected on his mother's words. It was true. Lydia's mask had fallen in the worst possible way. But the consequence was a deep reconnection with what truly mattered: family, friendship, genuine care. As for Lydia, they learned through the media that she had moved to another state away from Phoenix's public scrutiny. Her digital empire was in ruins, but rumors were already circulating that she was trying to rebuild her image with a profile focused on redemption and second chances. Edward harbored no resentment. Justice had been served naturally, without the need to fuel hatred or revenge. Months later, returning from a morning walk with Constance through the neighborhood, Edward found an envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small key. The letter was from Lydia. In words that for the first time seemed genuine, she apologized for the harm caused. She did not try to justify her actions or redeem herself, only acknowledged the damage she had caused and expressed regret. The key, she explained, was to the apartment she had bought at the height of her success, in one of Phoenix's most valued areas. She was donating it to the city's Elderly Support Association, and she would like Edward, if possible, to oversee the transition. Edward showed the letter to Raphael, who confirmed the legality of the donation. Together, they decided to accept the offer and transform the apartment into a senior social center, where volunteer healthcare professionals would offer free consultations and therapeutic activities. The Constance Mills Senior Social Center was inaugurated on a Sunday afternoon, with the presence of local authorities, healthcare professionals, and of course its honoree. Constance, blushing with embarrassment and emotion, cut the inaugural ribbon, declaring the space open to all seniors in Phoenix who needed care, companionship, or simply a welcoming place to spend their afternoons. That night, back in the house that now truly felt like a home, Edward found his mother in the garden, watering the plants she had started to cultivate as therapy. "I'm proud of you." "Son," she said without turning around, "I'm proud of you. Mom, your strength inspired all of this." Constance smiled, that serene smile that had always calmed Edward since childhood. "You know what I learned today? That forgiveness is not just for the one who receives it, but especially for the one who grants it. By transforming that apartment into something positive, you freed yourself from resentment." Edward hugged his mother, smelling the familiar scent of lavender she had always worn. At that moment, he understood that some storms, however devastating they may seem, serve to clear the air, to remove what is false and reveal what is true and lasting. Life continued its course in Phoenix. The sun remained scorching, the lake still reflected the blue sky, and in the Mills home finally, there was peace. Not the artificial peace of perfectly framed social media photos, but the true peace that comes from genuine love, sincere care, and the acceptance of the imperfections that make us human. Edward looked at his mother, at the wrinkled hands that had worked so hard, at the eyes that still shone with wisdom and kindness, and knew that he had found what truly mattered. Not in likes, not in the approval of strangers online, not in carefully constructed appearances, but there, in the home garden, watering real plants alongside real people. "Shall we go inside, Mum? Joanna made that special stew you love." Constance nodded, holding her son's arm. Together they walked into the house, leaving behind the garden where, amidst the scent of freshly planted flowers, the painful past slowly transformed into fertile ground for a future of renewal. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Edward and Mrs. Mill's story has touched your hearts. To continue on this journey of authentic emotions, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you were moved by this narrative about appearances and truths, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our next content. We look forward to reading your comments and knowing which moments touched you most in this story of redemption.